What's up, everybody? Nate, Startup Nation. So I have a very special guest. As you can see, we have a pretty cool environment today. Not your typical background that you normally see. So I was lucky enough to have Rick Mosteller on this podcast. He is basically the person that's kept me alive the last 6 months in a plane. So he owns Palomar Aviation. Obviously, we give a little bit of credit to the CFIs because they're the ones up in the plane with me, but he trusts them. So he was the one that helped me get my personal pilot's license, along with the CFIs that work for him. And then also, he has been an extremely successful businessman. He's sold 3 businesses over the last 20 plus years. And he has a significant love for aviation, which is why he started Palomar Aviation. And today we're going to talk about a few different subjects. One is going to be about customer service, but before we do that, I want you to talk a little bit about your history and just give people a little more insight about you.
Well, thank you, Nate. Really pleasure to talk to you today.
No problem.
Yeah, I majored in aerospace engineering way back in the day. I've been into airplanes ever since I was young. So I started flying at 17, licensed at 19. I was doing a lot of sailing and then moved into aerospace engineering. Worked for Lockheed for a while and then Sikorsky. Built and sold a few businesses. Always wanted to get into flying as a profession, and then I was able to start Palomar Aviation as a Cirrus training center.
Okay.
Right here in Palomar.
You've been flying for a few years too, haven't you?
A few years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So he has just a few more hours than me. So I appreciate you sharing that. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is obviously he has an immense amount of experience in business in general. But he's also a very compassionate man that, gotten to know him pretty well over the last 6 months, and I have a ton of respect for you. I also think that one of the things that we're going to talk about today is customer service. I think it's a big thing that you really specialize in, specifically when it comes to how you treat and talk to your, members or employees, or clients, or whatever you talk. And that customer service thing has been a very generic phrase that's been thrown around for many, many years. I can tell you though that a lot of people like to talk about their good customer service, but if it's really used the proper way, you really question if it's. So I think that you probably have that down. I'll talk a little bit about my experience. I think in any small business, customer service is directly related to goodwill and how it's not like you're spending 20 grand a month on marketing. So, right, and so your customer service directly relates, right? In fact, off camera, you just had somebody else call you because of a previous experience you had months ago, not longer, right?
6 months, 9 months ago, yeah.
Yeah, and simply, she could have called anybody to help her transport a plane, right? Yeah. But she simply did because of her experience with you. That was clearly due to a certain level of customer service that you provided, right? And so why don't you tell everybody that's listening today what your definition of customer service is, over the many years you've been working, why you think it's so critical to really focus on it.
I learned a long time ago, in order for somebody to be a customer, they have to first know you, like you, and trust you. So at the beginning, they have to know who you are. Mm-hmm. That either comes from a referral, as you said, advertising. Yep. Sometimes advertising is just that, but it falls short. They don't actually do the work. So they have to know you, they have to like you, they have to actually want to do business with you and do business with your employees. That starts with answering the phone with a smile. My wife has always said that. You answer the phone with a smile, have sparkle in your eye, and really be, there for the customer.
Your wife sounds like a smart woman.
She's a very smart woman. She married me. So.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, they have to trust you. In order to work with you either as a client or as a customer, they have to trust you, and to be in an airplane, that's even more so, because then it really falls into the safety category. They have to know that your aircraft are maintained properly, that they have the right safety equipment on board, and that the people that are teaching them to fly, the CFIs, are teaching them in accordance with the safety protocol, and everything that we do is around aviation decision making, making sure that they do it safely.
I can tell you, I still remember my first conversation with you, which is, I generally don't have that good of a memory when it comes to things like that, but a lot of customer service has to do with obviously the way you handle yourself and those 3 things you talked about. Trusting somebody is simply, you're doing it because you're buying from them, right? You're not, I don't have a natural affinity towards your plane. It was about the conversation, right? And obviously then a lot of it has to do, when you're talking about phone customer service, has to do with your inflection, the way you handle the conversation, the calmness, especially in your scenario, the calmness in which you talk, right? Because if it sounds like you're hectic or busy, you're already a little bit nervous talking about considering starting flying in the first place, right? And then that obviously basically builds the goodwill of a business. I can tell you, we have a very unique proposition with Green Guard Services, my main business, and that is that we get back to clients within 30 minutes or less. But that doesn't mean we solve the issue. Clearly, that's not always the case. But you recognize the issue, the question, the concern, and then you say, "I will get back to you," or "Here's what I'm going to do for you." And it sounds funny, but even we were talking about this off camera, right? I have a house in Arizona, and just simply answering your phone out in this small town will get you a ton of business. That's not necessarily always the case in major metropolitan areas like this.
Yep, that's true.
But starting off with the customer service, which is theoretically first impression a lot of the time, I think is really where it propels people to be successful or not, right? So when we first spoke, I was on a treadmill in one of my gyms that I own, walking, and just having that conversation with you was very easy. The conversation, you were answering questions directly, which was very important to me. There was no beating around the bush. There was no hidden discussions. It was just simply this was what it was. Right, and for me, I think that meant a lot to me initially, right? And so, talk a little bit more about that with how you approach people here at Palomar Aviation, but also just in your past experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I always find I'm never really selling on the phone. You're not getting them to actually buy anything on a phone call.
No.
You're trying to earn their respect, earn their trust. And I always strive to get people to come in and see what we do, see how we do it, meet some of our employees, see how we go through the training process with Palomar Aviation, and then see what some of our aircraft look like.
Okay.
And also they meet some other fellow pilots, people that have been through the process, and we always strive to get people to meet up either here at the airport or on the phone.
So when you do that, talk a little bit about what your intention is on the phone. You want them to just come in, but obviously, specifically here, your pricing is going to be more than others simply, but you're obviously bringing significantly more value. How do you do that without selling per se on the phone?
Well, we're always looking for the value proposition and always trying to solve a problem. And in many times when people are trying to fly, learning to fly, they're wanting to solve the problem of time. Time is a precious commodity. They're trying to shorten drive time to get somewhere a whole lot faster with a whole lot more fun. But to do that in a safe parameter, they have to do it safely. And you need the right aircraft, you need the right training, you need the right instructors and the right maintenance and everything. There's a lot of moving pieces to an aviation company to do it safely. And unfortunately, some people don't, and that always hits the paper. We don't want to ever be in the paper.
No.
We focus on really getting people up on the safety net.
More importantly, too, is, in conjunction with the papers, you just morally want to do things the right way too, and
always.
Not worry about the bottom line specifically, right? And sometimes customer service, unfortunately, can contradict the bottom line, but at the end of the day, that loyalty is what pays off, right? And you and I even have those discussions. So I can tell you, like with Green Guard, the amount of times we've had to make concessions for customers, even though we don't necessarily feel like we're in the wrong, because we knew that the relationship was far beyond that.
Always.
And if it wasn't, at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, and you stay consistent on that, and it pays off. And that's honestly my opinion on that. It can make things very difficult, specifically if people become irrational, which, in the restaurant industry, I can tell you is fairly common. We have a number of people right now that are doing the same thing, right? Pushing off like cleanings and all that, and you're like, you've been still open, there's still a fire hazard, you need to clean your system, right? But there's just a careful balance in making sure that makes sense.
We see that with some airplane owners. They push off maintenance. And that's the last thing you want to do is push off maintenance on an airplane.
My opinion too is if you own an airplane, you should, irrelevant if it's a brand new $1 million Cirrus or if it's a $30,000, 50-year-old Cessna. If you have the ability to afford an airplane, you should be able to do that, right?
You need to maintain it right. It needs to be insured right. And then you need to be trained properly. So I always use, when we're looking for instructors to come on our team, I always use the parameter of would I feel safe having my wife and our children fly with that instructor. And without exception, we always have said yes.
Well, that has to be a pretty big mental commitment for you too, because there's a cost associated with it, but on the other hand, you've made the formal commitment internally, and I'm sure with your wife and as far as the business saying, if we're going to start this business, we're going to keep people safe, no exceptions.
No exceptions.
And obviously that's critical in owning planes, but I would imagine that's not, unfortunately, how everybody thinks. And we think the same way with hood clean, mind you, a different scenario, but we're not going to, pardon my French, but half-ass cleanings to them, have an imminent fire hazard just because we want to cut 3 hours off of a job. And that philosophy is still, unfortunately the industry as a whole is not like that, right? And that kind of goes back into that customer service piece. You want to do things morally right, but you also want to make sure you're taking care of your clients the right way. It's what you do when they're not looking and seeing too, that as a customer service, it's not maybe always a direct interaction with the customer.
Right. Around the safety side, the airplanes, how it's maintained is one portion. The most important safety equipment on an airplane is the pilot. It's having the right training. And we get a lot of people that come to us wanting to solo quickly or just go up and fly, just get their pilot's license. And that's not what being a pilot's about.
Well, it's not really what the school's about either.
It's not what we're about. It's not what the school's about. And as you know, Nate, it's about being a pilot in command, or a PIC. Mm-hmm. And when you're a PIC, you can take not only yourself up in an aircraft, but also your loved ones, your friends, your family. You took a friend up in the airplane the other day and went all the way to Arizona. Yep. And I was so proud of you to do that. And you landed safely, came back, and making all the right decisions, planning it out ahead of time, and then doing that flight, and then coming back, and I know you had a great time.
I had a great time. A funny story about that is he's a funny guy. He's one of my business partners, but we were talking about the convenience of time and the importance of that, right? And so we got there and back, and it was like an hour and 15 minutes or something to Havasu, and then back. And then he gets in his car and he hits traffic, and he texts me. He's like, "What is this bullshit? This is I'm in a tin box right now. What am I doing? I'm better than this." Like, just messing around, right? And I was just laughing my ass off because he's not the pilot, right? But he's just like joking around, like, "Can we go back could you drop me off at Huntington Beach since I was going there?" And I'm like just laughing because you get spoiled in scenarios like this, but it creates values.
We were flying this plane, the blue one behind me last night, right during rush hour. I saw traffic below us, and we were doing 225 miles per hour over the ground. A little bit of a tailwind, up high, awesome. 225 over the ground. It was amazing.
One of the times I soloed when I was coming back from Havasu, I remember I was going, it was when I did I went to Ontario and then Havasu. So
long distance cross country.
Long distance, and I think I was going down the 10 or the 40, I can't remember, and it's just backed up, and I'm just like, haha.
See the brake lights?
Exactly.
I love it.
This is why I'm doing this, right? And so that convenience is an important piece. So
how many hours to drive to Havasu?
About 4.5 to 5, based on how many stops. With a 13-month-old, it makes it a little bit longer now. But now it's an hour and 10 minutes, and
love it.
If and when I buy a 22, it'll be less than an hour.
Less than that. Yeah.
That'll make life significantly easier. The advantage that this gives us is the fact that me and my wife always had a plan for 3-day weekends. Mm-hmm. Now we can leave on a Friday and come back on a Saturday, and it's not a big deal.
I love it.
So to get back on, because this is what always happens in my podcast, which people will appreciate, but the customer service piece of that is the fact that you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing when people aren't looking, specifically when it comes to setting all the process and procedures up to make sure it's right. But then also when you are engaged with them, you're consistent in that approach.
Yep.
I think it's extraordinarily important to do that. And if people really understand that, and it's consistency in which you do that. It's not, hey, I'm having a good day today, so I'm going to treat somebody okay right now.
Yeah, you got to take the right initiative too. I have a good friend that always said initiative is doing the right thing without being told.
100%.
You got to know what's right, the right moral thing, or the right business thing, safety thing, and then nobody's necessarily telling you. You just have to do the right thing.
And be consistent with that initiative.
And be consistent every day when no one's looking.
Just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean the person that calls you deserves that, right?
That's right.
So hopefully people learn a little bit about that customer service piece. I know it's something we've talked about a million times, but the consistency, the initiative you take in doing those things and just being responsive, even though it sounds very easy, check yourself on that. Say, in my business, am I really doing that? Am I doing it consistent? Am I answering my phone? Am I responding to emails, or am I going to be like, I'm going to cut it short today? If you're a business owner, you got to really check yourself and see if that's the world you want to live in. If it's working for you, fantastic. But I can tell you, even if it's working for you, the aptitude for you to have even more success by just doing those things is going to probably propel you forward even faster.
And your team's also watching you as the leader. And if you're doing it, that sets the example for the team. And if you're not, it sets the wrong example.
I mean, the 30 minutes with Green Guard, we expect our employees to do that too, internally and not just externally, right? Because then it becomes now a culture thing. It's not just a, hey, because the boss said so.
Yep.
Right? So customer service, it actually is important. Check it out. Appreciate it, Startup Nation. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks.